Welcome to Be Held's podcast, What's Your Story? Where lyrics are more than just words. I'm Giselle Lanez, your host, a licensed mental health counselor and model, guiding you through the journey of self-discovery and authenticity. Join me as we explore the heart and mind of an artist. This podcast is a safe space where your vulnerability is your superpower. Ultimatum, the title is really powerful already off the bat.
Yeah. So these last two tracks on the album are interesting. I think out of all the songs, Ultimatum is probably my favorite written wise. But these last two songs are things I'm still currently, I guess, going through. I think everything else has been past chapters in my life, but these haven't really been resolved yet, or I'm still kind of in the process of experiencing what's going on, subject matter in these songs.
So are you like knee deep in it? Like when you talk about this journey and you're still continuing, like what's that process look and feel like for you?
Yeah, so Ultimatum in a nutshell. If you don't know what an ultimatum is essentially you have two paths and usually you're required to take one path. And this song is all about the current state I am at with my career. I wrote it a couple years ago, but I think this actually relates more to what's going on right now, which is really cool to talk about because this is a current theme, a current issue right now.
Yeah.
So, I guess we can go into the theme really quickly. So, as a kid, having an Asian parent, you have three paths to take. You could be a doctor, you could be a lawyer, you could be an engineer. And
accurate.
out of those three options, I felt like engineer related mostly towards me. I always liked math. And that was something I realized essentially as life progressed was something that I could see myself tolerating, I guess, because I like it enough that I can see myself doing it as a career, but it's not something that truly gets me to, wake up every day. And I didn't find out until junior year of high school that I was like, wow, I really, really like the arts. I really like songwriting, especially, and the power it has. It completely changed the trajectory of how I viewed things. So, like, it changed my worldview, which was the biggest thing. Is like, I've always appreciated things that challenged my current beliefs. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is the ultimatum is, do I follow this path of creativity and be this freelancer, push this mission with more uncertainty in this direction? You don't know where it's going to go. You don't know from a capitalistic perspective. You don't know if this is even sustainable. Like, is this possible to make it this way in society? Or do I just keep things safe and play it safe? I don't think you'll ever really starve in engineering, but there's always caps on it. And learning already, I'm very fortunate to have a healthy environment in my first workplace. But, the issue is how much power, how much control do you have over what you're doing? You within every company, you always are a cog, and there's only so much you can possibly do because there's so many people and there's so many layers to it.
Yeah.
I think with what we're doing here and sticking with this vision, it's like we're doing something bigger than ourselves, and that's what gives me purpose. That's what keeps me going every day.
Yeah, that dilemma of being being led with your heart versus being led with your mind
Yep.
is huge, because you think of all the what ifs, and a part of it psychologically too is our brain can only reference what we've already experienced in the past and experiences of others. And when it comes to uncertainty and going towards a direction that we have nothing to reference to from our own past experiences, it can be a really daunting feeling, and this position where you do feel like it is an ultimatum. Do I go left? Do I go right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
it just, in those moments, it feels like there's no other paths around you. Like
Hmm.
when you speak, I start visualizing like just a dark space, and you have two paths right in front of you. And which one are you going to take?
Hmm.
And so, how are you navigating through that now? And referencing with the song that you still feel very connected to.
Some more brief things about the song. I've always been a huge fan of The Matrix, and I think it's one of the best movies that explain this concept
Mm.
of the red pill versus the blue pill. And I could briefly go over the chorus. Stuck with pills, red and blue. Don't know which ones I should choose. The outcome can't change what's inside. Who I hang with when I die. Will I make it? Will I fall? Don't know how long I should stall. I need to make an answer quick before they give me censorship.
Whoa, I just had full body chills.
I think what makes it hard also in this, not even just society, but human beings, we only have so much time on this earth.
Mm.
So there's not only a factor of you have to make a decision, but it always feels like you have to make it quick, or it also feels if you make a decision too out there,
Mm-hmm.
there's always going to be this governmental form or someone regulating what you have to say,
Mm-hmm.
which low-key is a little ironic for a country that preaches on free speech. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, that's another rabbit hole we can go down. Uh, but yeah, it's that decision, and I think there's always opportunities in a person's life,
Right.
and a lot of times I don't think we're trained in a way where we want risk. I think
Mm.
I think our brains are always going to think of path of least resistance. I think that's just ingrained in us because it's like, kind of that fight or flight mentality.
Yeah, being safe.
Yeah, I don't think we'd ever really want to, but it's a roll of the dice. I mean, it's proven that people can take risks and succeed.
Right.
Chances are low, but um at least in my opinion, I actually don't want to get to the conclusion yet because that could be explained in the final episode.
Right.
Um, but yeah, that decision is really really hard for people. I think most times people are going to take that blue pill rather than find out the truth or try to
Mm.
truly live life to the fullest because it's scary. Like you said, it's uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
That's something you can't train for. It's something you just have to have resilience and fight through it.
Yeah, for sure. And I I believe that a lot of our listeners for this podcast struggle with anxiety and depression and just your everyday life stressors, especially in today, but also analysis paralysis,
Yes.
right? Just
Yes.
like constantly thinking about like all all the ways it could go wrong, um, instead of also all the ways it could go right.
Exactly. And that's a great thing to pull spread awareness too, because I mean that's been a constant theme we've talked about in previous episodes, but the worst possible choice you can make is doing absolutely nothing.
Mm.
Is pre-planning everything. I still do it to this day and beat myself up for it because I think you regret it the most when you did absolutely nothing in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
I think it always hurts less knowing that you failed or it didn't work out rather than I didn't even take the opportunity to try that and see where that goes.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times I've noticed with people is when they fight those uncertainties and they explore the unknown, and you got to be persistent, you got to be resilient, but
Mm.
it's worked out for a lot of people, and there's a lot of concrete evidence. Dochi has been a great example. She manifested where she's at now 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and you just got to believe in yourself. It's you got to have that hope,
The power of
power.
belief,
Yeah,
for sure. And this song really highlights stalling almost. Like, I'm not gonna make that decision yet.
yeah,
It's a lot of
yeah.
like, I'm not making that decision yet. And it sounds like yet is a big theme of this song.
Yes, yes. It's purposely written in questions. So I
Mm.
think almost all of the song is a question because um there's multiple answers to these questions. It's not like, yeah, this is the direction I gotta take. It's kind of to make the listener think,
Mm.
um, leave it open ended. But what you were explaining with like the anxiety, that's what I wanted to capture in this first verse was
Yeah.
like two options at the palm of my hands. Decision heavy, feeling like I'm one with the sand. Each outcome weighs, getting harder to stand. Where do I go, feeling like rubber bands?
Mm.
Like I, when I envisioned how to write this, I think rubber bands is probably the best analogy I could put at it because there's always a breaking point, a breaking limit to it,
Okay.
and that's I think it's subjective how
Yeah.
everyone experiences it, but that's how I feel of it. You know, it's like
Describe that. Yeah,
yeah,
describe that for us.
it's so
Like, you're the rubber band.
yeah, you're the rubber band, and there's only
Okay.
so much pressure a human can possibly take.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's a balance to it. I think yin and yang. I've always been a huge believer in it. Um, I think there's risks you have to take,
Okay. That
and you
stretch
have to
you.
you have to pull it. You know,
Okay.
you have to pull the strings, but you can't pull it too much or you'll break. So you
So,
have to find that healthy in between of discovering the unknown,
mm,
but also play it safe at the same time. There's kind of a mixture to it.
what would be an example in your personal
Oh,
life
yeah.
if, like, what would be a huge risk that would expand it so much that you would break, if you're open to sharing that? Or if
Yeah.
you've even gotten to that point yet of like, what would that even look and feel?
Yeah. It's I can't say I've truly been in that state where I'm just gonna I like many humans are
Hmm.
afraid and
Like, would
this
that be like reckless and
yeah.
impulsive
Yeah.
for that point,
Yes.
right?
Yes. How I view it always is I like you said with the definition of reckless, I can't ever be like full sending things.
Mm,
I think
okay.
I'm always someone who needs to at least calculate the risk of it,
Right.
but I can't just sit there and do the same thing every single day. Like
Yeah.
and that's the whole point of this podcast. That's the whole point of the album is pushing myself out of my comfort zone and doing something that no one in my family's, really done before or
Mm-hmm.
explore the avenue out. Like we talked about earlier, there's only three paths you can take
That's true.
in an Asian household.
Yeah.
Um, and I can't say I'm the only one who's pushing those what's the word? Um, perspectives, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
um, that have been going on generationally.
Yeah.
But that is the beauty of the modern day
Right.
is the avenues you can explore and the
Mm-hmm.
niches you can find. There's so many paths you can take if you're
Right.
willing to take that jump.
So do you also feel and believe that on the other hand of it, it's not just two paths. There's so many that you can also fall into analysis paralysis
So
of
many.
so many paths now,
Hmm.
so many options. What
Hmm.
do I do?
So many. It's the dilemma that we only have a finite amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, you could also spend all your time thinking, but our scope of life is so short. So,
Right.
personally, how I narrowed that down was, and it took years. Like I said, I mean, especially in high school, I think why that felt so chaotic was there's like a bazillion directions you could take,
Mm,
and sometimes it's nice to narrow things down. I've gotten it to a point where it is these two paths. I think these are the two things I really believe in and love in. I personally love engineering, the mindset it's given me of
yeah.
critical thinking and learning how to solve through any problems. You become kind of like, bulletproof in a way, because anything thrown at you, uh, you'll find a way to get through it. I really
Right.
appreciate what it taught me there. Um, but if I were to stick with engineering, I would still want to do it in a way where it's me, like,
Mm,
and it's something I have control over. Like I can collaborate with the team to develop this product. Like I think going into like corporations, I think that's the beauty of a startup. I think there's always this point where things get too big for its own good,
mm-hmm.
and hopefully where this thing goes, I want to make sure that always stays regulated. The
Mm,
team isn't too big, and because of that, we're able to stick with the vision, if that
right.
makes sense. I feel like when you have too much, like it gets too fat, like there's too many components to it.
Mm-hmm.
There's only so much you can possibly control. But I feel like if you have a nice small knit group of team with specialties and they all kind of work together, I think you can really stick to that that vision.
Yeah.
It's not as abstract if it's regulated. It's a nice amount of people.
Yeah. And so, based on what you're saying, what I'm hearing is it sounds like you've recognized a point in your life where you want to have ownership. You want to create a vision and bring it to life versus being, and it's not a bad thing. Like there are people who want to be entrepreneurs and there's people who don't want to be. And it
Yeah.
sounds like that's your route. And I believe that's a very common theme that people who go into entrepreneurship experience
Yeah.
time and time
Totally.
again in their life of, man, I feel so conflicted, like this stability and security, which is also questionable sometimes, working for someone versus working for yourself, and what risk are you willing to
Mhm.
take?
Exactly. No, that's really well said. That leads into talk about the second verse.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of questions and kind of like that back and forth. I think another thing about this song is sticking with picking like that red pill or the blue pill
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
yeah, which path you should take. And I could go over this verse really briefly is no, I never felt brainless, but I always felt aimless. Was it due to the all the media? Was it due to the hysteria? All this hate is contagious, but the love seems outrageous. Was it due to how the world trains us? Do we need another world trade stunt?
Mm.
So I think what I'm trying to get out there is COVID was really scary. Um, and referring to the world trade stunt, being 9/11. But I truly think these moments are where we're most connected as humans as well, because there's this dilemma we're all facing that
Mm-hmm.
kind of it's not abstract. It's like it punches us in the face, and it's like,
Yeah.
how do we deal with this? I think that's the beauty in us human beings as well. Is there's this ability to connect with each other
Yeah.
and learn how to solve these complex problems when they just arise out of the blue.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we forget about that, and that's the sad thing. Is like you should always be grateful for, whoever's in your life and shoot them a quick text or just remind them how important they are to your life because you never know where things will go. You never
Yeah.
know. And it's just sad that we have to have these like catastrophic events
Mm.
to remember that. I mean, that should be something that's practiced daily.
It's, going back to how you reference the movie The Matrix and the red pill, blue pill, we've talked about consciousness
Yeah.
and being awake, and how we often find ourselves being on autopilot and like being asleep, right? And when you're describing this verse, it really hits the point of there are moments in our lives that shake us, like wake up, wake the f up, right?
Totally.
And in those moments, it sounds like trauma is what is connecting us all, but what it actually is on a bigger picture is we're just waking up little by little, and that's what's connecting us,
Hmm.
of us all being like, wait, we should be questioning things. We should be going down this path of like, what the F am I doing? What are we doing?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that what you're sharing us now through this song is your awakening. And I think it's a lifelong practice actually to continue questioning,
It is.
right?
It
And
is.
like just being conscious.
I really like what you said there because that's with everything in life.
Mm,
It's not it's super cliche. Everyone says it, but it's so true. It's not the destination, it's the journey with everything in life.
mm-hmm.
It's not like you hit that goal
Right.
and you are that person.
Yeah.
It's the skills you develop along the way. It's becoming a bigger person.
Yeah.
It's not like, yeah, you say this blows up and like I become a celebrity or things work out in that way. It's not like, yes, all right, now I have to play the role of a celebrity. It's like you still have to be the person you are and
Yeah.
spread awareness
Mm-hmm.
to everything you've experienced along the way. That's the beauty of it is
Right.
like those are the role models I always look up to.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the people that um are famous or have a lot of money and stuff like that because there's so many factors to that. There could be luck, there could
Yeah.
be just the connections they had. Um, I've always appreciated the truth seekers, like the people who, I mean, I glaze them all the time. I mean, Kendrick Lamar is my favorite artist representation for that, and what he's done this year has just shown exactly the mindset I try to be is be the person you truly are, like,
Yeah.
and stick with that. Like, no matter what outside forces try to pull you down,
Mm-hmm.
speak the truth. Like, fight for what you think is right.
Mm.
And I'm so happy that this is a year where we get to see people who, Tyler the Creator is another person, people who get to take their masks off
Right.
and express this vulnerability. That was the whole
Mm-hmm.
concept of this album when it came out 2 years ago, and it's really cool to see these big name artists doing the same thing. Is
Yeah.
taking that mask off, showing all the insecurities, showing
Mm-hmm.
the human side of themselves, and it feels so good once you get rid of those demons.
Yeah.
You're able to really express what's going on. It's amazing feeling.
The trailblazers, right? Because when
Yeah.
you say like people taking their mask off, I'm also hearing I'm no longer afraid to show who I really am. Like
Yes.
who you are,
Yes.
this is who you are, and you're
Hmm.
always going to be that, and you're going to grow and
Hmm.
expand. And we only hope that people would grow and expand with you, because there's nothing wrong with wanting more as the picture expands. And I think we need to normalize that, right?
Yes.
And these artists have always been themselves to the core, and now it's like, you know what,
Hmm.
I'm just gonna, what do I have to lose?
Oh yeah.
I'm just gonna be myself at this point.
I've always appreciated these theater kids. Like, I I wish I grew up in an environment where I could be like that. I think there's
Mm,
always this fear and this pressure to look look perfect.
Yeah.
I think that's just how I was raised. That's the environment I grew up in.
People pleasing.
Yeah, people pleasing, and I think that will always be a part of me, no matter how much I try to fix that. I always
Right.
feel like I have to be politically correct in
Mm.
every situation I've been in because the people I've been around are high status,
Yeah.
so I have to play that part.
Hmm.
Um, but I've always appreciated people that are weird, like just quirky, and
Just
like just
themselves.
themselves.
And like not really fearing
Yeah,
of quote unquote losing anything.
nothing. Yeah,
They're just kind of like, you know what? Like
that's awesome.
if I lose you, then you're never really meant to be in my life to begin
That's,
with.
in my opinion, that's the best way to live life because
Yeah.
nothing can truly get to you or affect you. Like you get to live life to the fullest, in my opinion.
Mm.
You get to be yourself, and law of attraction. I do believe that if you are yourself and you morally do the right things, you don't take
Hmm.
shortcuts, you'll find those quirky people as well. You'll find
Yeah.
that right community you fit in. Everyone has a community to fit in. Um, and like we talked about with previous episodes, also you can't. Everyone's journey is different. Like
Right.
not everyone has to shoot for the stars. It's your perspective on
Their stars look
what success.
different.
Exactly. Um, but the common thing we always try to emphasize in the series is being yourself, is being true to who you are and true to your vision.
Hmm.
That's what we're going for.
Yeah, and being true to yourself, and you're asking all these questions. What does that path look like? Like how do you get to the core and truth of who you are, and you know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's the age old question of like how does life work?
Mm.
And it's hard. It's like that's what physics is in a nutshell. It's
Yeah.
like making sense of life. It's I just think it's still there is too many variables, too many factors to describe what life is, and it's too subjective of a question. It's
Yeah.
like you can't pinpoint that. I've tried to do that for the past like 6 7 years of my life, and you just reach a point where it's like yes, it's important to ask these questions, but like I said, there's a finite amount of time.
Yeah.
You got to keep the scope relevant.
Right.
Uh, yeah, make sure also if you're asking these questions, don't spend all your life asking these questions.
Mm.
Have a balance in that as well. That's why I always believe like with equations and everything, like our goal is always to maintain equilibrium.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think it's possible to maintain equilibrium. That's
Or
another
what
thing
does
we could
your
talk about,
equilibrium look and feel like
right?
to you? Yeah.
Um, but it's important to live life as well. Like you
Yeah.
can't spend all your life, this especially. Oh my God, as I'm sure as a teenager, that's all you're thinking of is like it's the same path everyone takes, and being someone who's experienced that is like I grew up. For example, I grew up Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
It was shoved down my throat, and I feel like there's always this phase you have in high school where it's like I want to rebel. I'm punk. Uh,
Yeah.
That's what I was doing drugs, and it's like I'm atheist, and it's
I
like
do
and
remember
you just
that
take a
phase
you just
that
take
you
a
went through.
completely different left turn,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's a point in life where it's like, all right, maybe I shouldn't be this pessimistic about life. There's beauty to it as well,
Yeah.
and kind of bring yourself back.
Mm. You
Um,
had to experience the other
both
end of
sides,
the spectrum to know
exactly,
what that middle ground looked like.
exactly, and that's the coolest thing about the human experience. It's like,
Mm.
and I've had these talks with my dad. Is like, there's no. Sometimes there isn't even an answer to these things.
It's
Um,
true.
but I mean, the thing I always loved what he said was like, I could tell you all about how life works,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of things in life you just have to experience it,
Mm.
and I have to remind myself that as well because, um, I don't like enforcing. It's not that I like enforcing my opinions on other people, but I'm like a golden retriever. I get really excited when I discover something, but I always have to remember to take a step back and understand people's perspectives on stuff like that because I'm pretty sure we're all like this as human beings. Is like you discover something and you're like the first thing you want to do is like, oh my god, I can't wait to share this and this and this and this.
Yeah.
Um, but you have to remind yourself like, especially if you're trying to share wisdom to someone younger than you. I always think of this perspective as like they haven't experienced it yet.
Right.
Like they have to, like you said, experience like both sides of the
Hmm.
story, or there's just a lot of things in life that just take time. Like you
And
can't learn it in a day. You can't figure it out.
I like that you bring up wisdom because that was also just floating in my mind when you were saying this all because it's so conflicting as you grow up. Um, there's this famous saying, don't mind my stomach, it's grumbling so much. There's this famous saying, it's why like a wise person learns from others' mistakes.
Mm.
But as I get older, I don't know how true that is for me. And I think that's also part of the process and
Fair,
journey
right?
of like, you now question all the things that you've been taught. And it's like,
Right?
is that true for me now? And personally, I don't think it's true for me because I also think and believe part of the human experience is nothing really lands for you unless you're in that position. And
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't like, it's so easy for people to judge other people of like, I told you so, but I mean, everyone has their own experience and their own path in
Yes.
life, and they only can make those decisions moving forward themselves,
Themselves.
right? Like I don't know,
Perfectly said.
is it failing, is it
And
experience, like whatever it is, it's just the same thing now, and it's like it's just your life experience.
yeah,
I don't know, I feel like I'm just mumbling
yeah.
and jumbling right now, but
And I don't want to do like a shameless plug on what I'm studying right now, but um the newer field of engineering, it's called systems engineering, and that's kind of the take at it. It's a mixture, from my understanding, it's a mixture of like philosophy and
mm-hmm.
engineering. And it's really cool,
Wow, two different worlds.
two different worlds, but that's the whole thing
That's
is
pretty cool.
taking a holistic view on things.
Yeah.
And when you have that holistic view, I'm in a class right now called like systems thinking, and it's understanding different worldviews and
Mm,
understanding the big picture of things,
yeah.
because everyone has like these specific opinions, or this topic may be, um, for example, I guess like from an engineering sense, right? When you make a product, you're working with different types of specialties. You
Okay.
have mechanical engineers, which focus on the the mechanics of the problem, which is like design, how it looks, how it functions.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the electrical people focus on the circuits, and you have the software people who make like the brain of that. So say
Okay.
for a product you have those three fields.
Okay.
Um, the problem is, by stating you're a mechanical engineer or by stating you're an electrical engineer,
Okay.
you're solely focused on that
One part.
specific part of the problem.
Yeah.
And sometimes the problem isn't there. You have to search elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't just apply with engineering, that applies with politics, that applies with everything. It's to remind yourself that sometimes you just have to analyze a section, um, but the problem may be bigger than that.
Right.
And
Finding the root of it.
yeah, that's been blowing my mind.
There's
And
so
that's
many
like,
factors that fall into it.
exactly. And um, I think it's important to have that mindset with
Mm-hmm.
everything in life. Is I think what we're trying to get at is, for the kids especially, is to take everything with a grain of salt. You question it, but it is important to have your own opinions also at the end of the day. Like parents are another great example for that. As a kid, they're like God to you. Like
Mm.
everything they do is how it should be done.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, but the older you get, you realize they're human as well. They're just
Mm.
human with 30, 20, 30 years more experience than you. Sure, they've experienced stuff and you can pick their brain out of that stuff, But like you were saying, the experience of life is entirely up to you.
Right.
You're the one that judges that at the end of the day. You
Mm,
take the direction. You have the liberty. You have complete control over that. And I think that's a quick thing I really want to remind people is you have control over every little decision that goes on. Um, there's a lot of factors that go on in a day where you're like, you blame this, you blame that, but you can always find a way to react to what's going on, and there are always parts of it that you can tweak. Um, but the parts that you can tweak are always internal. You can't control what goes on surrounding.
mhm.
You can't control any of those situations or scenarios or surprises you experience in a day, but you can't control how you personally navigate through all that.
Absolutely. And I think a big part of this song, um, and your experience is asking I don't want to say the right questions,
Mm-mm.
but asking questions that are going to lead you to curiosity and
Yes,
expansion and
yes,
thinking of the bigger picture.
it's so important.
Um, and so what was your journey, or did it, yeah, what was your journey like of asking yourself these questions specifically to your experience and your journey of like finding your truth and being true to yourself?
Yeah. Um, I don't think necessarily, honestly, I want to answer it in the way of like how I personally was ended up being like true to myself, but I
Mm-hmm.
think I want to relate this to what music has done for me.
Yeah.
Um, and I need to go back to Kendrick. Uh, and how important he is he is sharing a culture essentially I will never experience, a perspective I will never experience. I can
Mm-hmm.
relate, I can empathize, but I will never know what it's like to grow up in such a crazy environment
Yeah.
and a place where you are not supposed to succeed. It's
Mm,
it's like it's just a bubble of chaos essentially. It's
right.
like you're just screwed in these environments for the most part. It's just a generational cycle of just the same problems and stuff like that. Stuff like going to the Philippines and seeing what a third world war torn country is like it's important to see it. Like
Mm,
you have to you may not be able to experience it. I'm not I'm very grateful I didn't have to experience what that's like,
yeah.
but learning about it is
Mm,
everything.
okay. So exposing yourself to
Exposure,
different
cultures, and
places,
cultures,
things,
yeah,
people,
anything,
culture.
people, exactly.
So it sounds like
Exposure.
that was like the door that opened to you questioning a lot of things.
Hmm.
Yeah, that does make sense.
Yeah, and I like to relate that with problem solving as well.
Mm,
Like what we were talking about, it's not that sometimes the problem you're trying to solve isn't in the discipline you're looking at. I think
okay.
that's an important thing to think about. If I were to go back to engineering, because I think this is the best example I could put in, is um, how important biology is to inventing things, like from an engineering standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Um, from nature, you can learn so much about how the world works
Yeah.
or how things work. From birds, you can learn how do they fly. It's like asking those type of questions,
Mm,
then solutions come up. But like I was saying, it's like sometimes you can't just magnify down one lane. It's like
right.
it's really cool to see that. I think with what I'm trying to say is everything truly is interconnected. I think that proves it true. Um, that everything does just work together through some higher force, or it's so complicated. It's amazing. I don't know how this all works out, but instead of being scared about it, it's like I think that's what's so cool about life is like how all these things work together.
Yeah.
Like if you really look at all these like little components, it's insane.
How everything is connected and everything is energy. It's interesting
Yes.
too, because
Yes.
it's like, you know, going back to the mind and body, like, for so long people never connected a stomach ache to stress. You
Exactly.
know what I
That's
mean?
another
It's like
great point,
stomach ache. I
right?
must have eaten something wrong or something bad. But it's actually because you're stressed about not finding a job.
Yeah.
It's like, what the heck?
Yeah.
How do those two connect? And it's like, well, yeah, the mind and body connection, right? So
Yeah,
like
exactly.
going back to what you're saying, how sometimes it's hard to recognize um what could be the reason if you're just so pigeonholed to like this is the problem, there's this one solution.
Yes. And I think that's another great point to bring up is that's why it's so important to understand people
Mm,
because you may never ever understand their perspective on things. Um but you need to learn. Like they may have a completely different viewpoint on life, but it's important to ask the questions why they are that person. I mean, talking about
mm,
like bullies, is like there's people in life that just like beat me up and I had no clue as to why.
yeah.
Um, but it's just important to give yourself that space as well because if you think of it in a way that um you question as to why the person is the way they are, you don't know what they're going through behind the scenes. We talked about that in previous episodes. But having that kind of mindset alleviates the pain yourself as well. It's
Mm,
like it doesn't hurt as much if you try to be that bigger person and understand.
the power of empathy.
Yeah, definitely.
It also sounds like you were experiencing a lot of physical symptoms that started having you like question, um, is this for you? And I also really believe that like our body tells us first sometimes
Yeah,
before our mind,
yeah,
right? So like you mentioned like pounding in my chest, like your mind racing.
yep,
And I think that's also, I believe that's also a good starting point too, to recognize and ask yourself certain questions and saying like, is this a good fit for me? Because my body is rejecting it.
yep,
My body is telling me otherwise. Um, and so it sounds like that's been a big part of your journey
yeah,
that
yeah,
a lot of people um, could benefit from also learning like what were those experiences in your body that started leading you to maybe this isn't a good fit for me.
yeah. I love what you said with mind and body because going with that, like gut health was another important thing. It's like
Mm-hmm.
we didn't realize how much our stomach impacted our brains.
Yeah.
Like that's crazy to think about how just our body itself is interconnected.
Mm-hmm. Because like if your heart, like if you're feeling anxious and your heart is racing and your palms are sweaty, your body's going into like fight or flight mode,
Yeah.
right? But like when you feel pretty like when it feels like natural and organic and right,
Yes.
you feel like a sense of equilibrium. You feel
Right.
balance. Like, yeah, that does feel good. And I feel like that's conflicting sometimes because I also have heard and experienced myself that like not every good decision feels good physically, right? These are hard decisions that you have to make that your body could reject it. And
Yeah.
that just goes back to like everyone's own experience
Yeah.
and their own journey of
Yeah.
like finding their truth or facing their truth and not being afraid to share it with the world.
That's true. But yeah, with what you said, I think for the most part, your gut knows what's up.
Mm,
And for example, with this path we're taking, with this podcast, with the vision we're trying to spread, um, I met, you're my cousin, but like the fact that we aligned, the fact that there's a team behind this now, and it's like it feels right.
mm-hmm.
So I always believe that you pursue things that feel right.
Not to spoil anything, until the last episode, but what are you feeling right now with your ultimatum and asking yourself this question of what's the right path?
Yeah. Uh, we could leave that mostly for the last episode, but at the moment, um, I want to leave it open ended. I want to say that I am definitely leaning towards a path,
Mm-hmm.
but we will discover that in the season finale.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you for listening and being a part of the Ripple Effect of Empathy on Be Held's podcast, What's Your Story? Together, we can continue to create a world filled with genuine connections and heartfelt stories. Click the link below to continue this transformative experience.